Well, a story that really caught my attention earlier this week, a train transporting combustible material was derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, late last week. Now, residents within a 2-mile radius were forced to evacuate as authorities carried out what was referred to as a controlled release of vinyl chloride from 5 train cars in order to prevent an explosion. Although, if you take a look at this video, it's pretty clear that it looks to be a bit of an explosion. And what's even worse—
No, it was a controlled demolition because they didn't want they didn't want it to fucking happen without. I think that part is normal. What's not normal, on the other hand, is because the derailment happened, those chemicals still absolutely fucking spilled over.
As we're talking,
and I think that controlled or not controlled, they most likely are. They're probably undermining the environmental impact that this is having.
Talking about vinyl chloride, it's a chemical that's used to make car parts and PVC piping, but it's also linked to multiple cancers, and it can be deadly if breathed in for too long. So what happened here, and were there certain regulations that could have prevented this or mitigated the damage? Reporters from the Lever News say there absolutely were regulations that should have been implemented, but weren't. The piece is titled "Rail Companies Block Safety Rules Before Ohio Derailment." And I want to read you just a few excerpts from the piece before we go to one of the reporters, David Sirota, to answer some of our—
I don't want to derail this any further and offer you the top of the hour ad break right now, okay? And if you want the stream to be uninterrupted with no derailments whatsoever, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with the Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. You can also get gifted a sub as well if you are lucky. Okay? Prezzo, I'm gay. Okay. Here is the 3-minute ad break now. Ted Cruz's taunts. Oh, no. Ted Cruz's tonsil stones. Oh, fuck. What a name. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs.
Our questions about this. They write, though the company's 150-car train in Ohio reportedly burst into 100-foot flames upon derailing and was transporting materials that triggered a fireball when they were released and incinerated, it was not being regulated as a high-hazard flammable train, federal officials told The Lever. Norfolk Southern paid executives millions and spent billions on stock buybacks, all while the company shed thousands of employees despite warnings that understaffing is intensifying safety risks. The company officials also fought off a shareholder initiative that could have required company executives to assess, review, and mitigate risks of hazardous material transportation. Now, here to talk to us about this reporting is one of the main reporters on the piece, David Sirota, also a good friend of the show. David, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks to both of you for having me.
So walk us through what happened between 2014 during the Obama administration and 2017 under the Trump administration when it came to these regulations pertaining to trains.
So there was a derailment in 2012 in New Jersey that involved actually the same chemical, vinyl chloride, that you mentioned. And there was pressure on regulators to do something about those kinds of trains and about oil trains. There had been a number of derailments involving trains carrying crude oil. And so the Obama administration had a rule proposed, an initial rule proposed to better regulate these trains. And it's important to trace how this rulemaking went. The rule proposed, or really asked, what kinds of chemicals should be regulated.
Thank you, Hassan's OnlyFans manager. And thank you, Ben Shapiro Loves Your Piker, for the 5 gifted subs.
or subject to stricter regulation when being transported? And then what should those stricter regulations look like? And what happened was that the National Transportation Safety Board told the regulatory agency, said, listen, these regulations should broadly cover not just oil, they should cover what's known as class 2 chemicals, which include, again, vinyl chloride. And the chemical industry lobbyists and other industry lobbyists went to work pressuring the regulatory agency to limit the definition of what a high hazard flammable train is. Limit it in a way that the train in Ohio, which you just saw on screen burst into flames, into a fireball, that kind of train ended up not being.
A high hazard flammable train is when a train is all crude oil instead of what this train was, which was called a manifest or mixed train. Hazmat is very common on mixed trains. It's considered a different but still important level of hazmat. I'm an ex-railroader. Yeah, animals are dying in the region. I know we're going to get to that in a second. What I want to cover first is who's at fault, obviously. Right now, we don't fully know, okay? I mean, but everyone expects. Everyone kind of has an understanding of who's at fault, okay? It's, of course, the rail companies that lobbied against safety regulations, that also actively tried to stop the many different instances where the workers' unions were saying we need more safety regulations, we need more employees, we need more workers to be hired. And I also have the footage of the fiery axle 20 miles before East Palestine train derailment.
Classified as a high hazard flammable train, even though the images certainly show that it was high hazard and certainly flammable. The second part of what happened was that trains that were subject to this rule were going to be required to use a special kind of new braking system to try to deter or at least reduce the damage from derailments. Most trains in the country are still using technology from the Civil War era, from the 1800s. And this was a new technology that, by the way, Norfolk Southern itself in previous years had said would significantly improve safety on the rails. But when the rule mandated that the industry embrace this and use it in a much more expansive kind of way across the nation's rails, the railroad industry sort of changed its tune. It didn't want the mandate. It cited cost concerns to pressure against that rule. Now, Obama's rule, although narrowed, included that measure to expand the larger use of those brakes on the nation's rail system. But what happened was that then Donald Trump got into office. Donald Trump, Senate Republicans in that 2016 election.
I have an update. I have an update on receipts. I guess I could hide the banking information on remittances, but I got a Google Doc on links to the each wire. It has banking information on it, but remember the first numbers I gave you guys, the 411,000 out of all the funds donated so far have been sent over, and I'm looking at the receipts right now with the numbers that I gave you already. The total that was cleared already, that was sent over, $411,856.37, 205,928,000 and 18 cents to Care Turkey and Care Syria, same number. And then Saf Giving distributing the funds specifically to Akut and Ahbap, $102,964.09 to Akut and $102,964.09 to Ahbap. The wires have been sent over. So it is now officially up to the Turkish banks to, give the funds over to, it's their bank. It's in their bank at this point. But the wires have gone through for the first payments for Ahbap and for Akut, as well as Care Turkey and Care Syria. So, and At this point, it's up to the banks. It's up to the Turkish banks. But we have been able to send it. Yeah, I'm gonna cover this in a second. Hold on, the Ohio guy. This is, of course, just the first. This is, of course, the first chunk of payment from like the first 2 days. All right. What? 40,000 between both. No, dude, that's not what I said. No. No, it's split 4 ways. So half of it goes to CARE Syria and CARE Turkey, and then the other 2 quarters go to dude, it's literally all on the link, brother. It's split evenly. Stop searching for hate in the chat. I just don't know why it's like confusing to people when it's something that I've described so many times over. There it is. It's not confusing. They're just trying to bait you at this point. Maybe.
Year, the Republican Party got about $6 million plus dollars from the rail industry. And Senate Republicans started beating the drum for Trump to repeal the rule. Beating the drum, by the way, with obviously the rail industry lobbyists. Donald Trump repealed the brake rule so that the nation's rails, the industry, does not have to kind of universally or even start to use these kinds of brakes. Now, one former regulator told us, as you'll see in our story, one former Federal Railroad Administration regulator told us that these brakes, which are known as ECP brakes, would have mitigated a disaster like this. But Norfolk Southern was one of the companies that was railing against requiring these brakes on their trains. And we just learned today, after the publication of our story, federal officials told us that this train did not have those brakes on the train.
All right, David, this story is so interesting, not just because of a giant fireball in Ohio, which would or should be fascinating in and of itself and worrisome in and of itself, but it's a perfect picture of exactly what's wrong with our government and our media. So I want to talk about that. So, I mean, of course you have the hilarious part that you mentioned that they're like, don't worry, it's not flammable. We don't have to regulate it. And it's an enormous fireball in the middle of the country, right? So you get a sense of how full of crap these politicians are, which leads me to the first part of this. When the lobbyists came in, what did they give, $6 million to John Thune, right? The leading Republican discussing and this issue and trying to make sure that they didn't do regulations. So when the lobbyists come in with all of these giant checks, the rest is just theatrics, isn't it? And I almost want to ask you something that's not in the piece, which is, do you think these guys bother to believe their own theatrics? Or are they just like, oh no, of course that vinyl chloride can't explode. You don't need brakes on trains. You use the old brakes. Don't sweat it. Yeah. Do the lobbyists believe it? Do the politicians believe it? Or they just pass the check and they wink and then they say these things in public and then the rest of the press goes, oh, it must be true. A beloved politician and a beloved lobbyist said it.
Well, I think in this case, what's really interesting is that the same company that pushed to repeal this rule was a company that was touting these brakes in prior years before that. They were saying these brakes are so good, we shouldn't necessarily have to follow other stricter safety rules because this new brake technology that we like can be used and can improve our safety. But the moment the government was considering making it a mandate, a requirement, and again, remember, it was narrowed in scope to the number of trains that mandate would affect. So even after it was narrowed, they didn't want a requirement for this. And look, they made the argument that the costs outweighed the benefits. And what they were, in granular detail, what they were saying was the costs to put these brakes on will raise costs for goods across the country.
Oh man, we just can't do it, brother. There's no way. Meanwhile, they got billions of dollars in liquid fucking cash that they're utilizing for stock buybacks. So it's just an absolute fucking lie. Okay? Straight up lie. Okay? Complete lie. Here's the investigation from Lever News from David Sirota. He says before his derailment, Norfolk Southern helped kill a rule to require better braking systems. As he talked about, lobbyists also convinced regulators to ignore the NTSB and exempt such trains from being strictly regulated as high-hazard flammable trains. The article was written 2 years ago. My coworkers and I have been trying to tell anyone who would listen to what would happen. This was an article on Vice from March 22nd, 2021. It's going to end up like Boeing. How freight rail is courting catastrophe. Workers are sounding the alarm and drastic cuts in employees and maintenance in order to increase profits are tempting fate. 2 years ago, they wrote this article. Just before 5 a.m. on August 2nd, 2017, Alice Murray was fast asleep when her entire house shook, almost as if a freight train had crashed into the block, she told the Cumberland Times News. That's exactly what happened. But that's not the last time, nor was it the first time that people have actually complained about this. People have been complaining about regulation and safety. Like, the workers' unions have been complaining about regulation and safety for a long time. Here, back in December, a union rail worker warned about the potential for a catastrophic train derailment. Then a week ago, it happened in Ohio.
Rail workers warned us about disaster like this. I heard firsthand months ago about the corporate practice of precision scheduled railroading.
Precision scheduled railroading is shorter staff, longer hours, longer trains, less safety, less maintenance. Do I have all that right?
Oh, you got it all right. I
Okay.
mean, a lot of the derailments that you're seeing on national TV is one of a few things. It's lack of maintenance on the track, or they've cut the track gangs too short and they can't get out to fix it, or they've cut the carmen's, which is the union that works on the rail cars. So we had one derailment here in Northeast Ohio where a wheel flange was very thin. It picked a switch and derailed the entire train. Luckily, it was full of candle wax and not something highly volatile.
Rail workers tried to strike over this stuff, but were stopped by Congress. A few weeks later, and here we are. Several Norfolk...
When you want to understand why the fuck mainstream news is not covering a mini Chernobyl that occurred in fucking East Palestine, Ohio, understand that this is part of the reason. Because mainstream news is liberal, okay? Let's be real. Liberal, not in the sense that they defend the Democratic Party over gender bills or whatever, which they clearly don't, by the way. They don't even fucking talk about all of the insane amounts of anti-trans legislation that's passing all around the country. But liberal in the sense that they're anti-union, liberal in the sense that they are beholden to capitalists and the interests of capital owners. If you talk about a massive train derailment that possibly has long-standing consequences, like health complications that are going to occur as a consequence of this, animals fucking dying in this region, okay? People that will get cancer because of the carcinogens that are now all over the air that they breathe, okay? If you talk about all that, immediately after the railroad unions collectively said this is going to happen weeks prior and Joe Biden fucking shut that shit down, all of a sudden, things look a little bit different. Wow, if only Biden didn't personally intervene with the rail strikes. I mean, that literally did happen. Yes, That is exactly what happened. Most pro-union president in the history, right?
Southern cars of toxic, highly volatile chemicals exploded fantastically in the tiny town of East Palestine, Ohio, 20 miles from where I grew up. So I met Clyde in East Palestine to ask him about it.
It looks like a faulty bearing caused a catastrophic derailment. These railroads are turning profits hand over fist. They've cut their workforce to bare bones, and now they're paying the price for it because the wheels are falling off the train, basically. Carmen were inspecting cars about 3 minutes per car. That's always been the industry standard. Now it's 90 seconds per car. The wheels are falling off the train, basically. Carmen were inspecting cars about 3 minutes per car. That's always been the industry standard. Now it's 90 seconds per car.
Is that because of PSR?
Yes, it's a rush job right now. And these guys are under pressure. I mean, they're working men and women, and if they don't hurry up and get this car done, they're going to be fired.
Great points. So I went to a press conference with Norfolk Southern and Ohio Governor Mike DeWine to ask them about this.
What could Precision Scheduled Railroad have to do with the axle failure that caused the derailment?
I have no idea that it's a mechanical issue. Precision Scheduled Railroading is a management process.
Not a great answer, and that's probably because Norfolk Southern let a worker take the fall, rather than a single corporate executive showing up in the town that they polluted to be held accountable. You see, Wall Street owns Norfolk Southern. 74% of shares are owned by a who's who of infamous hedge funds, and this is the business model that they demand. Profit at any cost. And disaster like this is simply a cost of doing business. They cut everything, make all the money, and pay off disasters in tiny flyover towns from the profit. But instead of answering for any of that.
Oh, speaking of the payout, you want to see the payout? You want to see the fucking fuck you money that they gave to the town? Where the fuck is Alex Press's tweet on this? Wait, did I accidentally close that tab? They gave $25,000. Residents of East Palestine, Ohio aren't even sure if their town is safe. They're extremely troubled by dead fish in the local stream and dead chickens found in a neighboring town. But guess what, guys? Don't worry. Norfolk Southern has got your back. $25,000 to an Ohio town where it caused a life or death evacuation. Remember, the local news at the time was reporting if you are in this area, if you're in the area of the smoke cloud, it's danger, grave danger to life. They evacuated the entire town. A couple days later, they're like, come on, you can come back in. It's all good. But fear not, 25 grand, baby. You're good. On February 6th, an apocalyptic plume of gas rose over the village of East Palestine, Ohio, blotting out the sky. Norfolk Southern, the U.S. railway company responsible for the toxic spew of vinyl chloride, has now offered a $25,000 donation to assist the area's nearly 5,000 residents who were ordered to evacuate their homes or face death. Hey, man, $5 to pop. You might have birth defects. You might just get cancer 10 years down the line. But guess what? You also got $5. Think about that. Think about the $5 that you got when you get cancer, 10 years later. We have established a family assistance center to address the needs of the community and support those directly impacted, Norfolk Southern said in a statement. It remains unclear what exactly the center is doing to assist displaced residents. Norfolk Southern has a history of lobbying against safety regulations. Shocking. The publicly traded company, which has a market value of $55 billion, fought the Federal Railroad Administration's push to upgrade the Civil War-era brake system that remains widely used in American trains and against stricter rules on the transport of hazardous materials. Meanwhile, its employees still lack guaranteed sick leave. Thank you, Joe Brandon, by the way. You are my best friend. You are the one who did this. You are the one who allowed this to continue. There is a very solid chance Norfolk Southern knew there was a hot axle on this train miles before it derailed, but ordered the crew to keep moving because stopping to inspect or set out the car would delay other trains. It will be interesting to see if NTSB is able to recover radio traffic and readouts from the defect detectors along the route. I love when we talk about like, bro, remember how like they covered Chernobyl? Remember how like HBO Chernobyl, like we were talking about like the USSR is so bad, the USSR is so bad. You know, oh, 9 Röntgen, not good, not great, right? Like, bro, this is the same shit. Breaking after the Ohio derailment, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg has no plans to reinstate Obama's brake rule, despite a warning to Congress that without it, there will be more derailments. Buttigieg's Department of Transportation is now considering a proposal that may weaken safety rules, actually. You know, guys, you know what would benefit in this time? You know what the American citizens would truly benefit from? Less regulation, which would create more derailments, because derailments are fun, you know? It's like a fun little activity. When toxic carcinogens basically enter the airwaves and also your water supply, it's like a fun thing. It's like an additional thing that you have to survive through. And everybody likes playing Fallout. A lot of people like playing that game, the video game Fallout. Why don't you want to live in Fallout world in the real world? I don't understand. You should be thanking me for creating this environment for you to enjoy. You know? Safety concerns have also grown amid Norfolk Southern's implementation of precision-scheduled railroading and operations policy criticizes a corporate money grab to cut costs of companies slash jobs more than a fifth since 2017. Meanwhile, the unions were literally like, bro, you need to hire more people. You need to hire more people. They're like, why would we hire more people when we can get the same one, when we can get 4/5 of the same workforce to cover the same amount of work? I don't understand. That's called efficiency. You're being stupid. Well, guess what? This is what happens when you look for efficiency. Okay. But of course, here's the thing. Why should they? Why should any capitalist corporation not do this if the government is very openly defending them? If the government is very openly allowing them to do this, if no executive is like even expected to go to jail for this, why should they do anything? Why? There's no legislation. There's no one forcing their hand. Why should they do this? When they can get away with throwing 25 grand, which is like honestly worse than not giving them any money, straight up. I think it's literally giving the town that they have potentially eviscerated $25,000 of fuck you money seems worse than not giving them any money at all. It's literally like an insult. It's like, here, take this shit, fuck off. It's like when you know, police unions or cities give payouts to like victims of police brutality. Like they did this in Florida where they gave the family $4 or something for each of the children that saw their father get murdered in their own home by a cop. And then the city paid them out, I think, 25 cents a person or something, or either $4 or $1. That's a real story, by the way. That happened like in 2017. Fuck, what was... I'll find it in a second. Anyway, on top of that, to make matters worse, ignoring concerns that understaffing could impact railway safety, which is what they did, they also initiated a $10 billion stock buyback program. Millions of dollars in corporate lobbying and poor regulations have created the perfect storm, according to Railroad Workers United, a cross-union rail workers caucus. The wreck of Train 32N has been years in the making. What other such train wrecks await us remain to be seen, RWU said in a press release. Oh, here, a man was shot and killed by the police. A jury gave his family $4. Yeah. Florida, baby. Nasty shit. Gregory Hill Jr. In 2014, I covered this. This is an old story that I covered way back in the day. Hill's mother sued St. Lucie County Sheriff Ken Mascara and Christopher Newman, the deputy who killed her son, for wrongful death. After nearly 2 weeks of trial and 10 hours of deliberations last month, a jury sided with the police and found that Newman did nothing wrong. The 8 jurors decided that Mascara was 1% at fault, while Hill was largely to blame for his death at 99% because he was drunk during the confrontation in his own home, in his own garage, where the cops literally shot and killed him through the garage door. Because he was listening to loud music. In a move that the family's attorney said was doubly surprising, the jury gave money to the losing party, $4. $1 for funeral costs, which was about $11,000, and another for each of Hill's 3 young children, ages 13, 10, and 7. To make matters worse, one of those 3 young children, all 3 of which who don't have a father now, one of them actually saw the cops murder her dad. Adjusting for the blame the jury placed on Mascara, the family would receive only 1% of the $4, or 4 cents, said John Phillips, who represents Hill's mother, Viola Bryant. This was a story that I covered at the time. Of course, back then, Black Lives Matter was not as fashionable. This is like, I guess, before Donald Trump like openly stated his anti-BLM sentiment. I think this was like when liberals themselves were anti-BLM too. Not to sidestep away from this conversation, but like a lot of people forget that even the Pod Save America guys used to be anti-BLM. I wonder if I can find the video and like in the comments, and we can read through them if you want to see what some of these animals were saying at the time. Before it was co-opted by the Dems, you mean? I remember a tweet from the Pod Save America guys apologizing for being anti-Black Lives Matter. I forget which one it was. Let me see if I can find it. I mean, it's probably gone. It's like cleared from the airwaves. I don't know if I can ever find it, but I think it was Tommy Vitor who apologized for it openly. Yeah. For saying, I'm sorry for being anti-BLM for the longest time. By the way, shouts out to Miskit for raising $81,000 for the Turkish and Syrian recovery funds. It's very nice of him to do so. He just did a 24-hour stream. Okay, anyway, let's get back to this story.
They're betting that the corporate media, under the same pressure for extreme profit as railroads, will only ask questions about how much cancer people will get and not why this preventable disaster happened.
But yeah, Norfolk Southern, the rail giant whose train derailed in eastern Palestine, was offered to cut the town a check of 25 grand. 5,000 people live there. That's $5 a person. We've been talking a lot about an angle that we don't see being discussed much elsewhere. The unions try to prevent this disaster. Yeah, sorry about the possible cancer that you might have, but here's $5 per person. Have you thought about that? Oh, here, by the way, this is the train going by a hot axle detector 20 miles before it derailed. Notice anything? Yeah. I was gonna talk about this as well. There's a hot box detector in the location of this picture, which is about 20 miles west of East Palestine, where it derailed. Was it a faulty detector, or were they told to set and release and get to the next one? Rumor has it was picked up by the detector but couldn't stop in time. FRA report will shine more light, but it might take 1 to 2 years to be released. Nice. Happy Monday. Just want to say thank you. This is my Uncle Gregory, or Uncle Greg. I just want to say thank you for getting all your viewers to see that. This is not the original video, though. This is a re-upload onto the YouTube channel. I wonder how many dislikes it has. Does anyone have a dislike detector? Back when everything was fucking so misleading. Race baiting cuckery at its finest. I don't want to get the dislike extension. I don't give a fuck. Here. It only has 349 dislikes. I'm surprised. Back then, they would get dislike botted like crazy. Cobb's dead. How can mutanoid extraction kill what? Brainwashes the lost souls. They're evil liberals, Democrats, evil, anti-American. I wanted to, look, there was a time when every single Young Turks video, every single TYT video was like, every single TYT video would get mass disliked. This video only got 33,000 views anyway, because it was just like, it was released on like a different time frame, basically. So you will not get a good assessment of like whether this, you will not get a good assessment of what like the YouTube fucking what the YouTube opinion was on this. You have not aged at all. Thank you. Hey, have you talked about Ohio derailment and explosion? This is a meme, right? You must be joking. Anyway, one of the reporters, we'll get back to this in a second. We're literally currently talking about this. But we are currently in the process of talking about the Ohio derailment. That was just something I wanted to show about, like, fuck you, kind of like a restitution that says fuck you to victims. Here is the Ohio news reporter, the local news reporter who got arrested. Body cam footage showing members of law enforcement and a top official in the Ohio National Guard confronting News Nation reporter Evan Lambert provides a different account than what the East Palestine PD released in a statement. Lambert was reportedly told his live shot discussing a train derailment was too loud while Governor Mike DeWine spoke to reporters. DeWine said he vehemently disapproved of Lambert's arrest.
You want me to file charges on you right now? I am allowed to be here. Did you not see that man put his hands on shut it down? You continued on. Go. Now. Go. Now. Or you can go to jail. Sir. You want to go to jail for criminal trespassing? Do you want to go to jail for criminal trespassing? Do you understand? You know how quickly our lawyers will get me out? I don't care. Sir, can we talk? I don't care. Let's talk outside. Go. Let's talk outside. Come out the doors. Out the doors. Out the doors. By other media right here. I'm going to listen. I don't care. You're going to walk out the door. I'm going to listen. You're going to walk out the door. Do not touch me. Sir, can we talk outside, please? I am trying to listen. Outside, please. And he escalated with me. I am doing my job.
I wonder why he got arrested. Silly goose. Don't you know it's illegal when a cop decides that you're not supposed to be in a place or wants to be a fucking petty bitch? Don't you know it's illegal to talk back to them? Especially talking back while being black? That's an aggravating charge, okay? I'm just letting you know.
This is covered by the First Amendment.
Excuse me, sir. I'm the building supervisor here. Please leave.
There you have it. You're going to stand outside. Or you're going to jail. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. Out. 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 You're under arrest. Under arrest. Oh, sir.
Oh my God. You guys, this is bad. Stop.
I am on the ground. What are you trying to do?
Stop resisting. Stop this. Oh my God. Stop. You want to get this. This is so bad.
Put your leg on your back. Lay flat, please.
You guys, he's a national correspondent. You cannot do this.
I'm with News Nation. It's all being recorded right now.
I hope it is.
That's great stuff. Good stuff.
Can't talk to people about doing their jobs. This is what it's like to be a black reporter in 2023.
Good job, guys. You did it. You fucking did it. Good job. This all works in unison, guys.
It could slow down the movement of goods, the supply chain across the country. Whether you believe that or not, that's up to you. But here's what's interesting: the railroad industry cited an hour ago an amount of $3 billion. Putting these brakes on the trains that would be required to have them would cost a total of $3 billion. Now, that's about 2 weeks of operating revenue that the train system pulls in, 2 weeks of revenue in a single year, meaning it's a tiny amount of money when you're talking about the entire rail industry, but they didn't want to spend it. And my guess is they didn't want to spend it because they presume that their current safety systems are fine. And if their current safety systems fail, that governments, whether local, state, or federal, will pick up the tab for the cleanup, for the disaster. That cost is socialized to the public, not internalized by the private company. So they made a cost-benefit analysis that, yeah, maybe the brakes would make things safer. They're the ones who actually said these brakes would improve safety. But in their cost-benefit analysis, it still wasn't worth it to them for their profit interests.
It's incredible. You know, one thing that really stood out to me, though, was it appeared as though the shareholders were very much in favor of the updated braking system. And in fact, I don't know if this is potentially fraud, but back in 2007, as you guys report in your piece, during a quarterly earnings call, the company's executives were bragging about implementing this new braking system. So, I mean, did they actually do that? Did they actually implement the new brakes? Because it appears that's not the case. So why did they say that to the shareholders?
Well, again, I think the company changed posture from prior years to its current posture. In prior years, it was essentially saying, hey, we found technology that we can go to regulators and say, hey, we don't have to necessarily follow these other safety rules because now we're developing special brakes. But then the minute the government considered requiring those special brakes, the company and the rail industry kind of writ large flipped. Now, let's be clear. I don't think it wasn't all shareholders who supported this. The shareholder resolution was brought by a group of shareholders. It ultimately didn't even get a vote by the company. But I do think I go back to this issue of what were the companies saying to the regulators and what were the regulators doing? And in this story, the thing that really I think blew my mind in reporting this out was you had a part of the government, the part of the government that is supposed to solely be focused on safety, not on the supply chain, not on anything else, the NTSB, literally went to the regulatory agency that regulates the railroads and said, this kind of rule should cover a much broader sweep of chemicals. It shouldn't just cover oil trains, it should cover class 2 chemicals as well. Vinyl chloride is a class 2 chemical. And ultimately, the Obama administration's regulators decided not to do that. And there was a town that had a big rail crossing that wrote in asking for these chemicals to be covered. So part of the craziest part of this story is the fact that these were clearly hazardous and flammable materials, but the government itself ultimately under industry pressure made a decision to not classify these kinds of trains as hazardous, flammable trains. And the question now is, will the Biden administration move to reinstate the braking rule, move to expand the definition of trains that are covered by these kinds of safety rules? There's been basically, so far, it's not clear what's going on that front.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, I do have a follow-up question on what you just said. I'm curious, is that something the Biden administration can do unilaterally, or would that need to pass through congressional action?
No, look, Trump repealed the rule. The Obama administration originally created the rule. I mean, this is a regulatory kind of rule that transportation.
Pete Buttigieg already said that he's not interested in this. Now, of course, part of the reason why Pete or Joe Biden or anyone doesn't even feel the need to address this or talk about it is because the media is not covering it. There is not enough anger. East Palestine is a tiny ass fucking town with 5,000 people in it, and nobody really gives a shit. This will continue happening over and over and over again, just like the railway unions said it would. It's just going to happen to a larger town. It's going to happen to a more populated area. It's just about assessing the risks in that situation. You know what I mean? It's basically about like how much of a stink can we make? How much damage can we get away with it? How much damage can we get away with? Especially when the media doesn't fucking talk about it. That's it. That's the reason why they don't give a shit. That's the reason why the Brandon administration is not doing anything as well. What? Not bad? Selam. Why does everything hurt? Oh.
Regulators can do.
Got it.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they did that. Absolutely shocked. And that's going to go towards my question. First, a quick correction. The railway industry put in $6 million to the Republicans overall.
Right,
John
that's
Thune was a third largest recipient of that money, but he did not get the whole $6 million. Okay, so now to the question. So, David, in the old days, what would happen is there'd be a giant fireball in the sky, and the local townsfolk would be outraged, and then they would push their representatives, and then the representatives would get in there and fight for them, and then But mainly the press would then talk about, oh my God, the fireball, oh my God, people in Ohio could have died, etc. And the press would create this giant concern, because we should be concerned about trains exploding near our neighborhoods, right? And then the regulators would come up with their analysis, and then the government officials would do it. That actually did happen earlier in American history. It happened all the time, right? But now we've got a breakdown in the system. First of all, you guys seem to be the only ones covering this, and great, we'll have the link to the Lever story. It's amazing in the description box below. And I don't know, do you see the rest of the press piling on? Because what I'm worried about is, and I'm not just blaming the press here, that every part of this has broken down. The press does not hold the corporations accountable, does not hold the politicians accountable. Then the politicians go, well, I'm gonna get $6 million, the Republican Party is here, from these guys. I'm gonna get nothing from the other side. And there's no downsides. There's no one telling people that I'm a monster who's in favor of giant fireballs in their neighborhood because I got bribed, right? No.
The media is a very important component of this, because they're the ones who are supposed to tie all of this together. And when they don't do that, the dude in Ohio doesn't fully understand who to get mad at, so he continues to get mad at like fucking, I don't know, gender neutral bathrooms or whatever the fuck. Okay? That's a issue. That's a major issue. Very, very frustrating. Not as frustrating as the top of the hour ad break, which everyone in that town of Ohio will be able to avoid if they use their $5 that they got, all 5,000 of them, on getting a Twitch sub here. Okay, if you're in East Palestine, you can use your $5 that you got from the Norfolk Southern Railroad Company on something good, like top of the hour ad break avoidance. Of course, if you haven't used it on that, if you got like a Frappuccino or something, you can use your free one in the form of a Twitch Prime. And if you've already used your free one, then maybe if you're lucky, you can get gifted a sub. The Dancing Elephant just gifted 5 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
No one's telling them that. And in the middle of the story, David, it seemed like the industry realized that in between 2014 and today, they're like, oh, there's no ramifications. Why would we do extra costs? Who cares if people die in these accidents, etc.? That's a tiny cost to us. We don't want to incur the larger financial cost. And it turns out, my God, nobody's guarding the bank. Just do the robbery. There's no consequences. So you tell me how it applies in this case.
No, I certainly think that's. I certainly think that's right. And actually, the history on this, actually, you can see the transformation. I mean, there were high-profile derailments that raised significant questions and garnered significant public attention in the late 2000s, early 2010s, which ultimately prompted the Obama administration to begin looking at doing this kind of rule. I don't know if we live in a world anymore where something like that happens and it prompts a governmental response in a serious way. I mean, let's just step back here. We just saw on national television a train oligopoly. By the way, a few months after the government broke a rail workers strike, in which rail workers were in part saying that the understaffing on the railways, while was creating cost cutting that inflated the profits of those railroad companies, was increasing safety risks. We just saw.
I will fucking throw you into the sun, offline chatters. Do you understand me? Do you fucking understand me? I will literally make it so that no one can ever write in this chat when I'm not online if you keep doing what you're doing right now. Nothing more annoying than clicky ass motherfuckers who like decide to do a quick spam in the chat together
in the middle of the country, in the heartland of the country, a giant disaster of a chemical fireball, reportedly a mushroom cloud, 100-foot flames, and very few people asking questions about what led up to this. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that if these rules had been better, had been more expansive, and had been enforced, a disaster like this wouldn't have happened. But I'm also not, I think we can't say that it would have happened had better safety enforcement been going on. And I think the scary thing is if something like this happens and questions aren't asked and public attention isn't focused and there isn't pressure on those who didn't act to now act, then we shouldn't expect better regulations. We shouldn't expect any kind of change. We should actually expect this kind of thing to happen again and again and again. And that's what's really scary about a media system and a political system that no longer even asks the questions about how did we get here?
Right. You know, for anyone who's concerned about, the lack of maybe arrests when it comes to situations like this, have no fear. There was one individual arrested. It happened to be a journalist from News Nation who was allegedly too loud as the governor of Ohio was conducting a press conference on the matter. He was later released, but I mean, it just gives you a sense of how screwed up our system of government really is, how the press really focuses on the wrong issues all the time, and tends to allow the corruption to just continue going on. I mean, and it is shocking, David, that Trump didn't drain the swamp here. It seems like he was swimming in it during his administration.
Of course.
Anyway, David, you are incredible. Thank you for your reporting. Thank you for everything you guys are doing over at the Lever News. And for anyone who wants to read this story and much more, please visit levernews.com/TYT. That's levernews.com.
Twitter vid related to this, if you haven't seen it. We saw it, but here, I'll rewatch it.
And the coverage that it has been getting hasn't been very good. So let's talk about the trail derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. East Palestine's about an hour north of Pittsburgh, almost halfway to Cleveland. Norfolk Southern has a rail line that goes right through town, and this derailment happened right on the edge outside of town on the border of PA and Ohio. Of the cars that crashed, 5 of them contained vinyl chloride. It's a monomer used to make PVC. The reporting on this has gotten vinyl chloride confused with polyvinyl chloride, the polymer made out of vinyl chloride. Now, the reason that this distinction is really important is vinyl chloride is very hazardous and very flammable. Polyvinyl chloride is a plastic that's used in like everything. The other thing about vinyl chloride is that it boils at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's shipped in its liquid form. Meaning that when these trains crashed and these started leaking, they weren't just leaking liquid, but they were spewing boiling gas. So vinyl chloride is really toxic. OSHA has the permissible limit of how much you can be exposed to it during an 8-hour shift as a 1 ppm part per million, average over 8 hours. So prior to this, the biggest spill of this chemical was in New Jersey, where one train car and about 23,000 gallons of vinyl chloride were spilled, but it didn't catch on fire. Now, this crash in Ohio has 5 train cars. These kinds of tanker cars can carry between 25 and 33,000 gallons. Let's call it 250 to 250,000 pounds of vinyl chloride. That's per train car, 5 train cars. There's maybe 1 million pounds of this toxic chemical spilling into the ground and also boiling off into the air. But then it caught on fire. I think this is where the reporting is really bad because no one is mentioning what the byproduct of vinyl chloride burning is. Of the many byproducts of burning vinyl chloride, one of them is hydrogen chloride. Hydrogen chloride is really unstable and latches onto water, like just water vapor in the atmosphere, and that turns into hydrochloric acid. So right now, government officials from the railroad, both the governor of Pennsylvania and Ohio are calling burning off the 1 million pounds of this stuff a success, but not mentioning that it means that we have hundreds of thousands of pounds of acid in the air, potentially. Now, ever since engineering school, I've studied a lot of industrial accidents. I just find it really fascinating.
I just don't understand what's the problem. Is a little bit of acid rain. Ne yiyorsun lan? Ananın amını yiyorum. Ananın amını. It's just a little bit of acid rain, bro. Come on.
And organizations like the Chemical Safety Board, NTSB, and OSHA all have like really good reports available to the public. I think as a designer, it's really good to learn about mistakes. When looking at these kinds of industrial disasters across time, there are a couple things that are pretty universal across all of them. One, the responsible party, in this case, Norfolk Southern Railway, always plays down the reality of the situation. Politicians also just repeat the same lines, and then news outlets just repeat the same. So all we're hearing is the responsible party's word.
The best part about it is that it's built in. This is so built in that I don't think Norfolk Southern actually took like a serious hit in the stock market. It's by design. They know that these cost-cutting initiatives could potentially cause these massive disasters, but ultimately you just throw 25 grand at the victims and move on, knowing full well that the media is not really going to cover it. Knowing full well that the government is not going to come seeking answers. Literally, there are people in every corporation that's doing this in actuarial sciences. They're doing this kind of risk mitigation. What is your life worth to them? And what happens if what happens if there's an environmental disaster? In this circumstance, it's wonderful because, again, it's a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo science. And science is confusing, especially when no one is covering it. And who knows what the long-term impact could be? You could just lie about it and then, deal with it 10 years, 20 years down the line, especially if no one is really asking questions. So there might come a time and place, 10 years, 20 years down the line when they're like, why the fuck is everybody getting cancer in this town? It's so weird. Why the fuck can you not grow any crops here? So odd. How did that happen? And then maybe the company will be forced to pay a fine. That's if you're lucky. Look at these workers just walking right next to the train cars. Yeah. People with personal chickens in East Palestine are all reporting all their chickens are suddenly deceased. What? Fight Club insurance formula clip? Here. Yeah, Chatter's confused about Palestine and Ohio. When you get to a certain level of rural in the U.S., they start naming towns after Middle East/Bible towns. That's right, baby. I mean, a really good movie that you can watch on another environmental disaster that was more of a slow burn is Dark Water, right? Isn't it Dark Waters? Mark Ruffalo is the main actor in it. Really good. It's about Teflon and other chemicals that DuPont has been basically fucking dumping into the waters, and also using in all of your shit that you have in your fucking house for a very long time. And what kind of, I mean, it by the way, Dark Waters is a real story. It's like We Own the City, right? It's the same shit. It's basically a dramatized version of real life events. Spilled chemical vinyl chloride creates phosgene gas when burned, which is one of the big chemical weapons used during World War I.
Cheryl.
This was another thing, the water treatment plant that blew up in LaSalle, Illinois last month.
Firefighters and environmental workers say it is safe for people to now be outside. There's no
I mean, this happened like a month or 2 months ago, and no one even heard about it. Apparently, like the people in LaSalle only heard about it through local news. But it's yet another instance. Like,
smell, and
people
there's
just
nothing
don't give a
covering
shit.
the surfaces near where we're standing. The worst of that caustic residue landed on the other side of this chemical plant, and people who live over there are not happy about what's now all over their property. An explosive fireball followed by thick black smoke erupted and permeated the air over LaSalle Wednesday morning. That's what you see in this video that was shared widely on social media.
I pull up to the stop sign, hear a loud explosion.
From just a block away by chance, Khalif Hamad happened to capture the moment something inside the Karis chemical plant caught fire.
Oh, it was loud. It was multiple explosions, not just one. It was quite a few.
As those explosions shook everything nearby, he watched employees sprinting from the plant for cover.
They was coming from out of the plant, running from out of the plant, like hauling.
So you actually saw workers running out of the...
I seen them all running.
People who live in the area shared photos of a substance coating their homes, yards, decks, and cars.
When I hit the windshield wipers, it looked black to me, then it turned green, and now it's like a brown color.
Another neighbor shared these photos of what she says is a hole eaten through her patio furniture in just a matter of hours. As firefighters contained, then extinguished the chemical fire, a representative with Karis Chemical tried to reassure residents.
Some of the material that was released during the incident, potassium permanganate, is used as a drinking water material. If you come in contact with that material, it can cause staining on the skin. The stain does not pose a health threat.
They know what they're making, and for them to say that they would let their dog in their backyard and eat some of that grass that stuff just fell on, I find that really, really appalling.
Environmental workers have continued to check the air quality and water runoff to make sure that it is safe for residents, and they say they will continue to do so. Firefighters are still here on scene tonight to control any flare-ups that might happen. We're expecting to hear from officials again tomorrow afternoon, perhaps with a preliminary cause.
Bro. You're already in here at 1:39. Stop. It's got to be a joke, right? Like when people say, "Have you been covering the East Palestine derailment?" This is a part of that. You're watching the coverage. Do you ever have fun? That's actually a really good question. I do.